just freaking wow. Shogun is seriously is Shogun is basically my most favorite like series of all time, and basically an epic miniseries. I don't know how many seasons it's got because like right now, the first season has 10 episodes. Oh, but my God, it is absolutely incredibly amazing. That I had to binge watch all 9 episodes that have been released so far, and I'm looking forward to the 10th and final episode of this season. I think it's going to be like tomorrow. Today is the 21st. I saw that I saw like in Hulu, it is going to release on the 22nd or the 20. I can't remember, but anyway, it's going to release either tomorrow or the day after. Whatever the case is, I'm gonna be there to watch it because it is freaking amazing. I am awestruck with how authentic this show is, and there's no like needless insertion of like characters just because for the sake of superficial representation. This is straight up an authentic Japanese epic. And of course, and it really respects its history really well. Now, granted, I am not a Japanese expert. I am just someone who respects the culture and respects the history behind it, and I very much am appreciative of like how amazing the show was handled. The themes, all the sensitive events that happened, and it was downright entertaining. Like I was the action and the action was top notch as well. So, but like all the characters in this show have embodied like absolute perfection about like how things work in would normally work in Japan based on what we've studied before, and I am so in awe. I am very much awestruck with how awesome the show is, and it was so good that I had to go see like many of the episodes a second time just so I can get the narrative and get the stories straight, just so that because I wanted to understand completely like how, all the different motivations, the relationships, the back and forth, and then and the customs that feudal Japan had gone through, and I am here for it. So yeah, but anyway, like needless to say, if you haven't gone to see this yet, it is well worth subbing to Hulu. Now, granted, I ended up subbing to Hulu at the time that like I thought Shogun would have all of its episodes released, but I somehow caught the tail end of like the end of the series, and I'm actually glad it was really worth the wait. But even then, I would say I would have gladly subbed sooner just so I can get myself into Shogun's world. And I gotta say like mad props to Hiroyuki Sanada for being an executive producer and the main character, Lord Yoshi Toranaga, and I yeah, this is an incredible effort, and I almost feel like I'm in that period, and I really want to I wanted to be I haven't been to Japan before. I really want to go. Let's go ahead and get started. So, what is Shogun? So, Shogun is actually a story that was adapted from a novel. I hear that there's a lot of great material in the novel, but that is essentially where the show is adapted from. It basically follows like this. It's basically a study of Japan and all of its works but it's done through through perspectives of like one particular daimyo named Yoshi Toranaga, and basically he is one of the five regents of Japan. So and so one of the five, yeah. So these five regents form a council, which are there to like help keep the balance of power in the wake of the Taiko the previous Taiko's death. So the next in line is the heir who is way too young to inherit this power. So instead, like a council was created because the heir was just way too young to assume power. Like the Taiko's power was like entrusted to a council of 5 regents in Japan. So there you have Toranaga, and then you have the current like a keeper of Osaka Palace, which is where which is where like the capital of Japan is located. You have Lord Ishido, and then after that you have Kiyama, I believe, and then Sugiyama, and then Ono. In this scenario, Toranaga is essentially in conflict with the other 4 regents of Japan for control of Japan. And this is essentially and this is happening under certain pretenses, which I will basically I'll just go ahead and hold back on discussion for until spoiler section, because this is a large one to unpack. But needless to say, like all of these situations, all of the circumstances that have occurred prior to the start of the show, leading up into the start of the show, have led to conflict. Conflict that's being exercised, almost, both secretly and out in the open. So so basically a war, so basically a lot of skirmishes are being waged in the name of like each other's of these 5 regions. And so the Toranaga is the one that we follow because he is essentially the centerpiece of the entire series, and I am just blown away with how well they handle Toranaga. So Toranaga is brilliantly portrayed by Hiroyuki Sanada. He is the executive producer, as mentioned earlier, but he also has had quite an impressive resume. So I've actually known him I've actually known him since his work in a TV show on ABC called Revenge. So for season 1, he had played the mentor to the main title character, who taught her a lot about revenge, and then only for his role to eventually get replaced in season 2 by Hiroyuki Tagawa, who played Shang Tsung in the 90s. But anyway, going back, he has had an impressive resume, of different movies that he's been a part of, and I'm very glad that he's finally got a chance to take on this really really ambitious film project. So that's basically what this is. Let's see what what I really appreciate about Hiroyuki Sanada is that he showcases Toranaga as being very cunning, and is ready to throw down when the occasion calls for it. So otherwise, most of the time he is being protected by very very loyal samurai. And they will willingly throw their lives away in service to the one daimyo. So anyway, so what's so great about Toranaga's character is that he is he does not willingly accept the title of Shogun. At least that is what he is saying. But we really don't know about this, because there's a lot of little politics at play here, and there are a lot of little sensibilities that ultimately make up a lot of what is. And what those are, I'll probably cover in I will likely cover in spoilers as well, because it is a lot to unpack. But let's just say the different customs of Japan make you wonder what exactly goes on within the thoughts and thoughts in the hearts of like all these like players, key players here. So, but yeah, we've talked a lot about Toranaga. Basically, he's officially like in conflict against the other four regent lords, and particularly with Ishido. So that in itself is not necessarily going to be a spoiler. It is essentially like this is at the center of conflict. But also, the period piece also happens to be in a set, like in a setting, which is like kicks off in the year 1600. You can call it Anno Domini or Common Era. And this is at a time when the Portuguese and the English actually have actually discovered Japan, and and it falls on their like under their discoveries based on on all kinds of like buffoonery that occurs, which it brings in a bunch of like many outsiders, including one who was found washed up along with his crew. So essentially, while Toranaga himself is the centerpiece, the character who opens up up to this world is actually one they call John Blackthorne. He is portrayed by Cosmo Jarvis, who I think he portrays this character really well. The Englishman who washes up on the beaches of Japan is none other than a man named James Blackthorne, and he has been washed up along with his crew. At the beginning, like you'll see that he is essentially the de facto captain of his ship called Erasmus, and essentially so he himself has been taken captive, but ultimately catches the interest of Toranaga, who I believe he's going to use in his grand plans to win the conflict against the other lords. But there's more to it. There's more at stake, especially given the setting that where these five feudal lords have intersected with the English and the Portuguese and some Spaniards. So that's so excuse me if I'm actually kind of going back, in different directions, because again, this is a lot to take in, but it is something I have been very impressed with, that I really wanted to put out this video here and just talk about it. So anyway, James Blackthorne, very brilliant actor. He's actually portrayed by Cosmo Jarvis, and and he's got and he is the reluctant. He's also known as the Anjin, which is very, very appropriately titled in episode 1. He is, which in Japanese means pilot. So it makes perfect sense. So he is in many ways, not just in terms of him being taking that role on Erasmus, his ship, but also the first episode of any series, and he is and it is the title that has been bequeathed onto him by the Japanese. So in the sense, Blackthorne, well, we'll call him Anjin, Anjin, or you can call him Anjin-sama. He is essentially our eyes into Japan, particularly from Toranaga's side. And he is also he himself has an agenda that he is trying to fulfill, but he eventually finds his way in Japan, and he eventually finds a place. The journey that the Anjin finds himself in is figuring out where does he fit in Japan, and what exactly are his goals. So he is in basically a lot of things put him in conflict. He has a lot of conflicting goals. He wishes to leave Japan, but then he finds himself entrenched in Japan, and so it's basically a battle of wills for him to like figure out for himself where he belongs. Can he freely like escape Japan, or can or does he or is his fate tied to Japan? And this is essentially like another theme that ends up running through the show, and that it's so wonderfully presented here in Shogun. So yeah, and then we have other players in the other players in Shogun include Mariko, or Lady Maria, a name that was bestowed to her by Catholic priests. And she is beautifully portrayed by Anna Sawai. I love her very much. I don't know that I've heard her name so many times before. I feel so bad that I'm not that familiar enough with her work, but I really want to meet Anna Sawai really, really badly. She is outright beautiful, and I cannot have. I think she portrays Mariko so wonderfully well, and I hope that she does a lot of really great things, a lot of more really awesome things. Moving ahead. So this girl has got a very long and prosperous career ahead of her. I wish her nothing but the best. So, other players that I really was really excited for was Tadanobu Asano, who portrays the double crossing Yabushige. So Yabushige currently serves like Toranaga, but he also serves Ishido, the Ishido, who is you really don't know like where Yabushige falls, and you always he's incredibly shifty, and it's very fascinating too. But another one interesting tidbit is that the actor portraying him, Tadanobu Asano, he also portrayed Raiden in Mortal Kombat in 2021. So that was pretty cool. I did not really realize that until I started looking through credits, and it's pretty freaking awesome. And let's see. And then so we mentioned Lord Ishido, and then there's one other there are some other characters. So there is the Portuguese priest. He is Father Martin Alvido, who gave Mariko her Christian name, and then and also translates and actually is a really proficient translator. So he is important for a certain part of the show, and then after that, there are many other players. So there's so you have so other key players include those within within Toranaga's kingdom, within Toranaga's regent. He is there are some really there are some loyal those loyal to Toranaga. So there's Hiromatsu. He served with Toranaga for a very long time. Absolutely reliable and very, very memorable. Then there's also his headstrong son, who has never seen battle before. And then there's basically a whole cast of other characters which I won't cover, but for now, the focus is on the principal characters. So that is Toranaga, the Anjin, Mariko, and then Yabushige. So and Ishido. So these five are they heavily figure into the plot of Shogun. So throughout this series, you will have to throughout the series, there's a series of moves throughout the series, you almost feel like this someone's playing a board game, a very, very gory board game about like who's got what resources, and and like how is one going to outplay the other. It is really exhilarating stuff to watch and just witness, and it's always so breathtaking seeing that, like, okay, you think like your side, like the side that you root for is going to win, but no, 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 the other side has got another thing up their sleeve to either cancel it or just make your life even more hellish. And that is, and that excites me so much, that to see like the double crossing, the triple crossing, like the one upping, like so many power plays that go on here. And then like also the different stations that are like traditional in Japan, they also play figure in very heavily. There's a lot of like Japanese like lessons that end up applying really well to the show, to the tone of the show, and then like which end up heightening like the eventual battles in this in this series, like to like heights I didn't think I would find myself to be much more invested in, beyond like just brilliant sword play, and then and a bunch of like other fighting tactics I'm not going to get into here. But anyway, so that's all I wanted to talk about for like for the entire like series. But overall, like going from episodes 1 through 9, I was basically like invested in every single one of them. There was not a time where I was checking my phone or just like leaving it in the background to like watch. Instead, I was just like genuinely interested in everything that was going on. So maybe I'm not going to remember all of it, but I'm going to try my best to like to at least get the basics of what's happened in each episode. So I want, so like before going, there's really no question. This is a very legendary like epic miniseries. I'm just going to straight up give this a 10 out of 10. So this is like one of the shows that like I didn't really see any problems with. I thought this show was true to form in every which way possible. So if you haven't yet and you really do love Japanese history, I would suggest getting onto Hulu. And I mean, like, I will say the only problem about watching Shogun has nothing to do with the show itself, but rather the service that it's on. So I paid about like I did end up paying like about $18 or so, for this, for to sign up for the month. Now, like Shogun did like air each episode, did release one episode a week, so I don't think that that's going to work like it does with Amazon or Netflix. But I think it was a smart play. I think like Shogun would earn about 3 months worth of like subs, just because of the nature of the show. So this show like spans 10 episodes. So if you really want to get invested, the 3 months would do it. But at this stage, since it released in February, I think like 1 month will do it for you, especially if you binge everything up to episode 9. And then episode 10, I am looking forward to like watching when it releases. So I'll put out another video about that one. That's it for me. Thank you very much for watching my review on Shogun from episodes 1 through 9. If you like what you saw here, please do give it a like and comment on what you enjoyed or did not enjoy. And if you want to see more content like this, then please hit the please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Hang loose. All right, now it's time to go into spoilers, and we'll go episode by episode. Now, I don't think I can really get into all the plot details. I mean, like, that's a lot. This is a lot of stuff that I've had to digest for the first time. So instead, I'm going to try my best to like go into broad strokes of like what I did get to see. Um so episode 1 so let's talk about episode 1. Episode 1 is about is in Japanese, when translated to Japanese, is essentially pilot, but it is very thematic for everything that is involved. So you have the actual pilot, known as John Blackthorne, who is the pilot of Erasmus. First episode of any series is essentially the pilot. So this title is absolutely appropriate. So John Blackthorne, he is the pilot of Erasmus. So he's an Englishman who serves on a Dutch ship named Erasmus, and his goal is to essentially like discover Japan, and under the pretense that they are merchants. They're not merchants. They're actually like privateers. So like they do not. So essentially, pirates who work at the pleasure of any government. So in this case, they serve England. So at the start of it, the previous captain ends up like committing suicide, but because he has basically lost all hope. But Blackthorne refuses to die, and he refuses to give up. So essentially, he becomes the de facto captain of Erasmus, and like like with no food, no water, and basically no chance to like clean up after themselves. The crew essentially like eventually makes its way to lands of Japan on the beach, where they are basically captured in a village called Izu, or I don't know exactly how to pronounce that, but it is, but it is a village that's controlled by Yabushige, who he encounters first. So essentially so at that point on, we cut over, the show cuts over to Yoshi Toranaga, the daimyo of Edo. Toranaga has some lessons with his son on about falcons and such, and so like they talk briefly before they report to Osaka Castle, where they are to meet Lord Ishiro, the current caretaker of Osaka Castle, and then the other three regents. You have Kamiya, I believe it's Kamiya, and then Sugiyama, and then Ono. So these are these five come up, form the Regents Council, who is put in place to watch over Japan, since the heir apparent is too young to assume power after the Taiko's death. So essentially, like the crimes that are laid bare to Toranaga by Ishiro is that he has taken up a lot of power. He's essentially approved. He's consented to 6 different marriages, and the size of his fief has actually doubled in size, which leads on the surface it would lead to concern that he's increasing in power, when the others have consented not to do so without each other's permission, or I guess that's how that power balance works within these 5. And so this essentially, and this becomes the catalyst for the Ishiro and the other regents to strip him of a certain lady named Ochiba, who has given birth, who is essentially the mother of the heir, and she is being recalled back from Edo to Osaka as a in response to the paragraph. So likely it is actual, but we can't. But I don't know that that is the actual reason why. Because like I myself am very skeptical about like all the different moves, about the reasoning behind the moves. I'm very much intrigued that these motivations would lead him to make these power plays. No, none of the actions that regents take in this, particularly in this setting, are small. They always have like very, very huge ramifications. So pulling off moves such as these, it sends a lot of waves and raises a lot of concern. So the very fact that that Toranaga is being is standing accused of taking power actually ends up offending one of his soldiers, one of his samurai, who basically does a very dishonorable thing by breaking into the palace floor during actual business, and this is considered like an offense by death. Also, insulting the accuser, Ishiro, for basically laying down an insult, which, according to Toranaga, is perceived to be an insult. And unfortunately, this leads to a very harsh disciplinary action, a punishment against the soldier. So this soldier just happens to be the husband of Fuji, who eventually becomes a very important character in the series. And so, unfortunately, like the penalty for him disrespecting this bureaucratic process, is that he himself will be executed along with their infant child, who has not had a chance to live properly. Like very very little kid, and this scene really irked me a lot, because like as an uncle, I never like it when children are being killed, and it has been done before, unfortunately, in previous shows like Game of Thrones, and it's really heartbreaking, and it really really sends you in ways that is completely understandable. I mean, I myself got angry, and yet I sadly accepted that this was like likely something that they would do. So like yeah, and it's really sad and heartbreaking to watch. But you power through, and you get on to the next scene anyway. So. And this all in comes Mari, and this also ends up like, so Fuji getting her infant son taken, her baby son getting taken away by Toranaga's army, which is basically being ordered by like being pressured by Ishiro. This also like brings introduction to Mariko, who essentially calms Fuji down, and essentially comforts her, by like allowing her to be the last one that holds her son before they are summarily executed later in the episode. But Fuji ends up living, but her family is going to be effectively dead by the end of this episode. Not very pleasant, I would say. So then we cut over to James Blackthorn's situation, where he and his men have washed up ashore and is essentially captured by Yabushige. Blackthorn is essentially like looked at as the leader that they talk to, and of course, like Blackthorn being English, he ends up having his words translated by a Portuguese priest who basically wants to have him killed. So almost nothing that Blackthorn says to Yabushige to plead for his life is essentially like crushed by, trying to get like corrupted by like the Portuguese priest. So eventually, like Yabushige sees through to what the sees through what the Portuguese priest's intentions are, and then he ends up letting him live, while basically castigating the priest. Or just basically admonishing the priest, for trying to have him killed, trying to get him killed. Yabushige, however, allows the priest to select another one of Blackthorn's men to be executed, and this is basically one of the most disturbing deaths I had ever seen on TV. Now, maybe I don't watch enough TV to see like what's even more disturbing, but essentially, like, one of the men ends up like getting tossed in a boiling cauldron, where he's just like kind of just like forced to like sit there and let the boiling water like melt his flesh away, and he basically is screaming in agony and he's screaming and screaming on, and he's there for like many hours into the evening, and then he basically draws his final scream at the very end when Yabushige is just like chilling out, in his home. So this is one of the more disturbing scenes that you'll see in Shogun, which also sets a tone of what to expect in a very brutal time like this. But that same evening, Yabushige also, being in the house, he is also greeted by Lady Kiko, who is essentially the lady who sings at night. She is the most prized courtesan in Izu, in Izu. So she's basically the most prized courtesan in the brothel at Izu. So she finds another young man, and she ends up making love to him right in front of Yabushige, who becomes very, very, very aroused by this. So, but why am I talking about this? Because Kiku ends up having also figures into the plot in many different aspects, which I'll get into in later episodes. But she does have some level of influence that goes on here too. I forgot to mention the lady that was mentioned in my review, Lady Ochiba. She also like came in to try to she is also introduced in the in episode 1. Let's see. So moving forward, okay. So okay, moving back onto so moving the perspective back to Toranaga. Toranaga finds out that a barbarian has washed ashore. Basically, this is James Blackthorne that he knows about, but not necessarily by name. And he sends his general Hiramatsu, to go and investigate the barbarian, and who he learned about because of his spies. And so Yabushige's intention was to essentially hold James Blackthorne in his ship, along with the many weapons that he had in his ship, for his own personal benefit. So because the spy was able to figure out Yabushige had procured something that was very valuable, namely Blackthorne in his ship. Hiramatsu arrives, and then with an army, and he effectively seizes Blackthorne and the ship. Blackthorne protests that he is not a prisoner and that he demands to be released from Japanese custody. But then a Portuguese merchant named Rodriguez steps in, and he basically he persuades Hiramatsu to take Blackthorne, and he'll be the one responsible for a safe passage back to Osaka, so that he can be taken to Toranaga. So Rodriguez and Blackthorn, they identify each other as enemies, but they have no reason to kill each other right now. Only that he has to listen to Toranaga to actually to deliver him to Osaka. And so they're just, the encounter that they have with each other is cordial, but it's never too terribly friendly to where they can really excuse each other for the sides that they play. Rodriguez is Spanish, and he sails for Portugal, for the Portuguese, while in Portugal, and the Portuguese are essentially sworn enemies of the British Empire, who Blackthorn represents. Essentially, while they're en route to Osaka, they are caught in the swell, and then Blackthorn succeeds in navigating the ship safely through the swell and onto the shorelines of Osaka. During this voyage, Rodriguez was lost ashore, was thrown overboard by the swell, and then and Blackthorn suspects that he was able to make his way onto shore. So he basically asks his captors to let him find Rodriguez and bring him back, and they essentially do. But during the rescue, Yabushige was on the verge of committing suicide rather than allow the swell to kill him, until he was saved by Blackthorn. So while the interaction itself seems a little insignificant, it does end up factoring into how they will a developing relationship as two enemies who are who have enough respect that that one's not going to try to kill the other without just cause. So then the journey continues on. Rodriguez has essentially found the ship's rudders, which implicate Blackthorn and his crew as not as merchants, but as actual privateers who serve at the behest of the British Empire. Rodriguez announces his intention to turn those over to the Portuguese, and then Blackthorn ends up slowly accepting that he is going to be fated to not leave Japan alive. So at least that's what is the implication. So they have discussions about fate, which is something that is very highly valued in Japan, in Japanese culture. They have discussions about fate, and then Rodriguez actually talks to him about how every man has three hearts: one for the mouth, one for your friends and your family, and then the one that you keep to yourself. Which ends up which also gets us to think, how exactly are all the decisions going to be made? How do people think, and what do people say exactly in order to mask their true intentions? So there are things that you can only say to the public, and then there are things that you can only share with people that are close to you, and then you have to go. And then the one secret that you'll never tell anyone, but you keep to yourself, because it could very well be your true goal, your true intention. And I actually found that to be very intriguing. And so that's that is basically where the episode ends. Albeit like at the very end, Fuji loses her husband and her their son to execution. So yeah, that's that for episode 1. I thought this was a really brilliant start to the series, and I and that made me look forward to episode 2, the servants of two masters. Um, so the again, the title here is very thematic. You have like principal players. You have a couple of principal players who actually are serving like two masters. So what is kind of like revealed here is that Mariko is actually a convert to Catholicism. So she serves basically the Lord God upstairs, and she also serves the daimyo like Toranaga. Um, Toranaga. So while she prays to God, she also ends up like she is devoted to servitude towards with Toranaga, and then you have and then like and then you have Blackthorn, who serves the Queen of England, serves as Queen of England, but he's going to end up finding that he'll likely end up like serving Toranaga in his grand plan to fulfill the agenda that Toranaga is known for. So in the beginning of this episode, so this perfectly segues into the start of this episode where like which basically goes back to a flashback scene where he is essentially, I believe that the man he talks to at the beginning is the Taiko. Before dying, the Taiko is basically requests for Toranaga to protect his son, the heir to Japan, and he is and also teach him the lesson that the man who is at the highest point of existence is the one who is the loneliest. And these are the two requests that the Taiko makes towards Toranaga. And then like we go back. So as to like, what is Toranaga thinking? Is he really going to be protecting the heir, or is he going to like take Japan for himself? What exactly is going on here? So I mean, he had been in the previous episode he had been accused of like increasing his fiefdom, and then and yet he has been charged by the old Taiko to protect his son at all costs. So what agenda is Toranaga really serving? We don't know yet at this point. We just know like surface level that is like as the viewer, these are the purposes that he is seeking to serve. And yet somehow like what we find here is that but like the whole running theme, which also runs in conflict with the running theme that that he does not want to be the Shogun. And yet it's eventually, given that the name of the show is Shogun, I believe eventually he will end up like assuming the title or at least try to. But no doubt, So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and so moving forward, the episode like shortly after the flashback, Blackthorn is introduced to Toranaga through an interpreter, who is essentially a Portuguese priest named Martin Alvido. So he is as I previously mentioned in the review, he is the one who gives Mariko the name Lady Maria, her Christian name. So although he and Blackthorn are from two opposing factions, Alvido ensures him that he is just there to like interpret his words to the letter. and so he does. So like so there's talk between Blackthorn and and Toranaga, who refers to Blackthorn as the Anjin, um, and then yeah, or basically Anjin or Anjin, Anjin. Yeah, I'll say Anjin. So I think at this point I'm just going to refer to Blackthorn as Anjin. So yeah. So he asks the Anjin about his purpose, and like which is to like open relations between Japan and England with the Queen. And this is and on surface that sounds very diplomatic. Doesn't seem very innocuous. But then, like, this conversation is interrupted by the sudden arrival of Lord Ishiro, who is patrolling Osaka Palace as the caretaker. And so when he sees that the barbarian, the Anjin, like in the presence of Toranaga, he begins questioning Toranaga's like what like mental state, wondering if he really cares about his life, and or if he's just kind of given up. And so, in order to appease Ishiro, Toranaga sends sends like Blackthorn to prison in Osaka. So then, Ishiro is satisfied and he leaves. So like in prison, Blackthorn encounters yet another another Portuguese priest who actually ends up getting in prison. So, and he essentially tells Blackthorn that the inconvenient truth that the Jesuits who had sent them on this mission do not really care about those missionaries. They will essentially let them die while they serve their true goal, which is to usurp, was to extract riches from Japan, basically. So essentially strip them of all their valuables through trade, and then try to enrich their own countries. Yeah, and then so Blackthorn finds some sense of common goals with the priest, while like every hour each prisoner is getting executed. It's not very pleasant to hear that like every hour like they just simply send these men to die, and it's basically, and according to the priest, it's due to their faith in Christ, and instead of the daimyos in Japan. So a lot so so like unfortunately, like as no. So the mere presence of the Anjin in Japan ends up like stoking the ire of like two of the four regions. Now I'm not going to go into detail. So I'm trying to the two regents who were the two regents who are Christian have serious problems with a Protestant in Japan, and so they wish for them to be executed before they vote on the fate of Toranaga. So Ishiro ends up ordering the execution of the barbarian, aka the Anjin. But then Yabushige sees this as an opportunity to free like the Anjin, because he believes that whoever controls the Anjin will also end up with control of very powerful artillery that can wipe out their enemies. So I guess like it's implied in this scene that that Ishiro complies with Yabushige to free the Anjin from under their nose. Maybe that's the case, maybe it's not. Um, but then when when the Anjin is set to be executed, he gets escorted onto a road um, where his execution party is ambushed and killed off by random bandits who were hired by Yabushige, and then in turn they too are executed by Yabushige's men. Yabushige and his men, I should say. Yabushige delivers the Anjin once more to Toranaga, who then who and the Anjin is very thankful for being rescued, and then reveals the true intention of the Portuguese, according to his viewpoint. So in this case, the Anjin reveals that the Portuguese and Spanish have through written contracts have laid claim to any and all lands that are non-Catholic or non-Catholic, and will essentially replace all non-Catholic leaders with their own. And so this ends up raising the concern of Toranaga, because of the worldly knowledge of the Anjin, he ends up taking the Anjin into his stead into his regent, offering him a place to stay for the time being, while he proceeds to question the motives of the Portuguese. So at an early point in the episode, and I forget to mention this, the Portuguese have make their trade through what's known as the Black Ship, which is their flagship that carries tons and tons of riches away from Japan to trade with many, not necessarily just their country, but to the secret bases that they've been building in Macau. So, and Toranaga finds out about this, and he denies the Black Ship, from leaving their coastal waters in their land. So that same evening, because in retaliation, the Portuguese priests scheme to assassinate the Anjin because he's causing he's disrupting their business. So they sneak in they finally activate one of their sleeper assassins, a servant who actually served Toranaga for a long time. She is activated, and she kills several servants and guards before going into the Anjin's quarters, chambers. But in actuality, it was actually Toranaga who was in hiding, and he successfully slashes the throat of the assassin. And in spite of all this, the assassin continues to fight on to kill anyone who gets in her way. The Anjin arrives, and he gets wounded, but then he helps Toranaga back the assassin away, so that she can finally die in her own blood. So Toranaga ends up figuring out that it wasn't Ishiro who tried to assassinate him, but it was one of the Christian regents, and that basically concludes this episode. So we move on to episode 3, which so episode 3 concludes with So episode 3 is tomorrow, where it opens up with Toranaga concluding that he has to smuggle the Anjin out of Osaka and back into somewhere safe, so that he can continue to be of use to Toranaga and his regent. So I'm not going to get so here. I won't get too much into the details, but I will talk about um, some of the encounters that have happened here. So essentially, something as simple as trying to leave Osaka Palace, but under the circumstances that Toranaga is in, their goal is to escape Osaka, and they do so by doing a lot of political maneuvering. Um, so Toranaga is set to leave, but yeah, his plan will be eventually to leave, but uh, but on the surface, there is a plan to just obscure the plan by declaring that there are citizens that do not need to be in Osaka who would like to return home to Edo, and so the plan so then the departure begins. They're met with many different checkpoints and random searches, and it gets to a point where even the Anjin has to get involved and basically chastising him in his foreign language for violating a woman's privacies. Um, yeah, and so eventually they relent. They're essentially because they've been ordered away to a much higher priority while the convoy leaves. So in the middle of the night, the convoy is ambushed by one of the Christian regents by the Christian regents. And so a skirmish occurs. Toranaga is exposed, but then he goes out fighting. Fighting, and I gotta tell you, the katana sword fighting is so brilliant here. I had not seen really fine sword play happening with a katana, and while this episode was going, I was actually getting out my practice katana, and then just slashing and slashing while I, just basically feeling like a kid. It was quite brilliant to say the least. So eventually, they do make it to they actually make it to the docks. Osaka docks, where they finally where Toranaga finally reaches the black ship and agrees to allow the black ship to sail on the condition that Toranaga and his regent are allowed to escape, but then they insist on leaving the Anjin behind because he is an enemy to the Portuguese. So while Toranaga is being carried off in the black ship with in the black ship, the Anjin ends up having to heist another ship so that he can escape. He ends up escape from it. So he's tested very heavily by Rodriguez, and then and his captain, and they're trying to figure out if they should just let him go, if they should just let him die, because the truth is that those the ship crew, they say that they had alluded earlier that they do not serve the church, they actually serve the crown. So killing the Anjin really has no positive effect for them, as opposed to having a positive effect on the church. And so they just let him go. So it's okay, that's cool, awesome. So there's really not much of a conflict between the two groups of opposing sailors from opposing sides. And eventually, the Anjin reunites with Toranaga and his regiment on his ship, and then they learn a lot about each other before Toranaga ends up challenging the Anjin to a swim to the shore. So And I thought this and then one other part that, and so that was like a really nice tie up for Toranaga and the Anjin, who is given the honor of becoming Toranaga's Haramoto. So in Japan, that's apparently the highest honor you can have within like a regiment, no, like a regent. And so like that's so that nicely wraps up. But one other plot thread that happens is that during the escape from Osaka, Mariko's husband, Buntaro, who essentially like does not like the Anjin very much. He also refers to him as the barbarian, and that he thoroughly disrespects Mariko a lot. He's basically left behind to fight off the pursuing like force from Ishiro, and and so they escape. But Buntaro's left behind, so um, Mariko like loses a husband, and they're basically thankful for his sacrifice. Even like Toranaga recognizes the sacrifice that he makes, and yeah, and that's the only other thread that I wanted to like bring up, because this thread um, will become like influential in the later in the show. All right, and that's that for tomorrow, because the next episode is called The Eightfold Fence. So, the big thread that happens is that so like so the so before going into the so Eightfold Fence opens up with Toranaga finally reaching safely ashore on Izu. And with Yabushige returning to the village, and then welcoming like Toranaga with open arms. Toranaga, like shows his gratitude, but he also but he also demonstrates his commanding power as the daimyo of Edo. And then shortly after this introduction, Toranaga leaves to take on some important business, according to his son. The son charges like Yabushige with training the gun regiment within the army for the war to come, and so the Anjin is essentially tasked to help out with the training of that regiment. But during that time, the Anjin has a very difficult time readjusting to his circumstances, because he still longs to reunite with his crew, and he wants out. He wants nothing to do with what he calls the savage land, but he is essentially given a lot of many gifts from Toranaga through his proxy Mariko, and who also serves as his translator. The Anjin is given a home, and he's also given a staff who will be caretakers to his home. And he also gets a consort, and this consort happens to be Fuji, whose family was executed for the insult that her husband inflicted in episode 1. Unfortunately, and those executions were unjustified, in my opinion. So, but still, Fuji now has a new purpose. She's very reluctant to take it on because he's a foreigner. She refers to him as the barbarian. This is a recurring theme, that basically anyone who does not care for his presence, they call him a barbarian. They don't even call him Anjin. They call him the barbarian. But eventually, the consort comes around. Fuji comes around, and she, and despite her, reservations, um, she steps up to serve the Anjin well. So there is a scene where I think it's Omi, the nephew to Yabashige. Um, he demands he demands that the Anjin turn over his guns, his muskets, but then which he strongly refuses, and he at gunpoint, and then but then Fuji steps up and offers to take the guns from him, and protect them, even going as far as to pointing a gun at Omi's face in front of his men. And so Omi, relents, and then they carry on their business. But essentially, but this moment actually ends up ends up becoming like a stepping stone towards the trust between her and the Anjin. So like in the throughout this episode, the Anjin teaches Yabushige's men all the like the cannon tactics. The gun regiment ends up being able to blow away targets with precision, the kind of precision that was lacking when they were working with the Portuguese. So now that a British man has shown them the way to utilize these cannons properly, Yabushige sees the value in keeping the Anjin alive and keeping him well treated. So and it's quite awesome and it's quite amazing to see the relationship developing between these two adversaries. Not forgetting that Yabushige actually executed one of these 12 men because a Portuguese priest told him to. Or didn't tell him, but anyway, or allowed him to pick out someone else to execute other than the Anjin. But anyway, discounting that, they do, Yabushige and the Anjin end up getting along with each other a lot better, and over time, this gun regiment is now it becomes much more capable of handling cannons. So during this time, the Anjin slowly but surely adjusts to his own surroundings, and he's able to adopt certain aspects of his life, some of these aspects into his life, including consistently bathing to stay clean, because that was never a concern for a sailor like the Anjin had previously, prior to his arrival in Japan. So now he appreciates being clean a lot. Plus, he learns about natto, which is admittedly not something that people endear themselves to at first, but it's actually not too bad. It's pretty good. I've had it myself, and it's not bad. You just have to get past the sliminess, but otherwise, it's actually quite good for you to enjoy. It's good for your, I believe it is good for your gut health. But anyway, never mind about that. So, in a moment of weakness, Mariko ends up getting closer to the Anjin, and they end up making love to each other. And of course, with the next morning saying, so I hope that you enjoyed that courtesan last night. And then it takes him a while, but he finally gets the hint that, she was good to me. Thank you very much for that. All right, so that basically clears up that thread between the Anjin and Mariko for this episode. Now rolling back to the canon regiment training, one of the messengers shows up. I believe his name is Nobaru Jozen, and he has he basically carries a message, say Nabara Jozen. That's who he is. So Jozen, we'll just call him Jozen, but Jozen is the man who carries a message demanding for Yabushige to report back into Osaka, where he would essentially like admit to his crimes and then commit seppuku. So, and then like Yabushige, the silver-tongued samurai that he is, he actually convinces Jozen and his men to stay for the night, so that he can see the benefit of going back to Izu to train up their gun regiment. To which Jozen agrees to, and so they're basically left comfortable while Toranaga's son is left contemplating what to do with the messenger. So the thing about Toranaga's son is that he has never seen battle, but he's looking for a glorious battle, glorious fight, so he can live up to his father, I presume. But now he's got he now sees like Jozen as an opportunity to rise up above his current station, which is being like kind of a worthless, seemingly a worthless son of a daimyo. So the next morning, Toranaga's son is commanded by Yabushige to demonstrate the power of the cannon regiment. But then Toranaga's son, he ends up pointing the cannons at Jozen and his men, and then they are executed. They're basically blown to pieces in a very gory fashion. It is very disgusting to see what the effects of the cannons, and then not just cannons. These are, if when you listen to the sounds of the cannons that are coming, the cannonballs that are coming out, you can hear chains. So essentially what you end up seeing that's getting fired are the chain cannons. So these are the same cannons that Anjin was going to train up the regiment to practice with, and they end up using the chain cannonballs on Jozen, which is so ridiculously crazy to see. And just looking at the visual effects, and then the rattling chains. I can't make those sound effects very well, but anyway, the brutality of using these on an enemy is it's crazy, but you just can't look away from. Jozen actually is basically is dismembered by the chains, but he's still alive. And so in his last breath, Jozen Jozen says you can't do this. This is not how samurai fight. Before he is beheaded by Toranaga's son, and so which ends the Eightfold Fence episode. Going back to this, why was the episode called the Eightfold Fence? Because it refers to an object that because earlier in the episode, because the reason why that the episode was titled "The Eightfold Fence" is because of the structure that Mariko tells the Anjin about. The structure is meant to keep your many feelings fenced in, and so it becomes impenetrable. I believe that's what it is, but feel free to correct me if I was wrong in the comments, because last I checked that was the explanation, and that's why Mariko has been so secretive about her intentions. But other than that, it's I thought this was once again a well done episode. All right, so moving on to episode 5, which is Broken to the Fist. So there are two major points that occur. So one starts at the very beginning, where where like where like the which the so like so the opening of this episode, Broken to the Fist, deals with the aftermath of executing a messenger you know, of Osaka. So basically, Toranaga's son is stripped of his duty to lead the gun regiment, and then gives it to Yabushige's nephew, Omi. I think that's what. Yeah, Omi. So that's so now Toranaga's son, he yeah so Toranaga, son is left, having to deal with the consequences, but on his own time. But in the meantime, the business that Toranaga was on was basically was raising an army, and in this army, happens to be Bunto, who had willingly stayed behind to prevent the pursuers from getting to Toranaga. And apparently he had been lost for 20 days before he was found by Toranaga, and was brought back into his army. So it was yep. And it was, needless to say, very disheartening for the Anjin and for Mariko. So they end up so now they have to, and not only that, but Toranaga has assigned Bunto back into the Anjin's house so that he can be close to his wife. And this stirs up a lot of trouble. It stirs up a lot of trouble for the two, because now they have to deal with hosting Buntaro. And Buntaro is going to have to deal with so one evening, one evening when the Anjin hosts Buntaro, Buntaro gets into a drunken stupor where he ends up assaulting Mariko because of for past failures, and the shame of and basically reveals Mariko's shameful past, where essentially her father was responsible for some really atrocious acts, including executing family members of someone who had disgraced them. So I think that's what it was. But and as a result, Mariko is left to live with that shame her entire life, but basically denied a chance to die. And Buntaro basically holds that over her head, which basically enables him to, in his mind, to be abusive and mistreat Mariko. And so in response, the Anjin lashes him out for it, and Buntaro apologizes to him, but he never apologizes to Mariko, which is very unfortunate. But that is just a reality that they live in. Back in those days, women, were treated so lowly. I mean, basically they're nothing more than they either play the role of a mother, or they are basically concubines, courtesans, or basically playthings to a masculine Japan. So I think that problem still exists to some extent today, and it just happens in many different forms. Now personally, but I do appreciate that there is a history behind it, and that this show does not really shy away from these from the past like this, because it's very important to acknowledge history and how do you move forward. with it. You can't just simply ignore it. You can only move forward with the knowledge that you have, and with the hopes that you have learned enough to move forward and hope not to allow history to repeat itself. So that's essentially what gets highlighted here. So the other thread that occurs in this episode is that the Anjin is gifted a pheasant by Toranaga. So Toranaga's son hunted down a pheasant, and Toranaga gifts it to the Anjin. So the Anjin basically decides to age this pheasant and hang it outside of his house. But then and throughout the course of the week, the Anjin is tells them, do not touch this pheasant. If you do, you die. So essentially, unfortunately, his English, his Japanese is not, like Nihongo no Joz, is his Nihongo no Joza or I don't know exactly how to say it. I'll have to learn how to say that. But basically, his Japanese is still not developed, so he just simply and he doesn't understand that anything that he orders is taken very literally. So when he says that anyone who touches his pheasant should be put to death, eventually it gets to a point where the pheasant is just littered in flies. The gardener is been revealed to take down the pheasant, and then as a result, the gardener is put to death. Because the Anjin does not understand this, and yet he is horrified of the orders that were carried out in his name. So he essentially tells his staff to leave him alone because they executed the gardener for those very same orders. And so unfortunately in this circumstance, the gardener being dead becomes the tool that's needed to draw Yabushige's suspicion of Toranaga's spy away. Yabushige, believing he has found the spy and has taken care of it, goes on to doing his other things so that he can continue to double deal, like he does, so that he can preserve his own life. Towards the end of the episode, while Toranaga conducts business up in the mountains, a landslide occurs. People are buried. Many houses are destroyed. Many are injured. But the Anjin's staff are hit with this, but they manage to survive. And so the Anjin just simply is reminded that this is the kind of thing that's going to happen a lot in Japan. They allude to this back in episode 3. Mariko alludes to this in episode 3, letting him know that, hey, that was a baby earthquake. And so carrying that back into episode 5, because I forgot to mention it about episode 3. This is just one of many events that occur. And then but it all, and so so then that's where the episode ends up leaving. I forgot one other thing. It's been many episodes since Lady Ochiba was told to was allowed to return to Osaka. And at the end of this episode, she does end up coming back, and she basically convinces the regents to accelerate the death of the plans to kill Toranaga Dono. By the start of episode 6, ladies of the Willow world. So this deals with the many different power plays that the ladies involve themselves in. So Lady Ochiba, with her arrival, she ends up seizing hostage like the regents, the other four regents and the other three regents and their families. Like Toranaga is not anywhere to be found, because he is still in Izu, um, trying to raise an army powerful enough to, or trying to like maneuver his way um, to stop them from trying to kill him, and continue on with the mission that he was set forth with. There is a flashback scene between Mariko and Oshiba. So they were childhood friends at the time, and then during that flashback, Mariko gets married off to Buntaro, and there's and it's mainly explained that this was in service of Mariko's father, and that's that. So and we know how the relationship goes between Mariko and Buntaro, which is not very pretty. Yeah. So because in the aftermath, the Anjin saves Toranaga from the landslide, and so Toranaga awards him with a larger salary and basically another house. Basically increases his fief, and he is now Chief Admiral of the Kanto, and now in charge of the Cannon Regiment. But yeah, so which also basically angers Omi, but but they have to, but now they won't really have a choice. Buntaro basically apologizes to Toranaga for his behavior at the Anjins that same evening when he physically abused Mariko. He never not in the previous episode or in this episode does he apologize to Mariko for his treatment towards her, and I think it's more of a Japanese a male thing that occurs. We do have to acknowledge that may have played a huge role in the behaviors that were exhibited. One other point of contention was the Anjin's continued request to leave Japan so that he can be with his crew and that they can continue on with their lives. Toranaga basically refuses these requests, but he figures that giving him a night with the most beautiful courtesan in Izu would appease him. So they set up a night with him to be with Lady Kiku, the bird who sings at night. The lady who sings at night, the bird who sings at night. I think the title is actually the bird who sings at night. Back in Osaka, the Portuguese priests catch wind that Lady Ochiba returning to Osaka has quickened many different actions that would eventually lead to Toranaga returning to Osaka so he can be executed. Apparently Ochiba has had a very strong hatred towards Toranaga to a point where she now wants him dead, and she wants anything that can be done to ensure that he meets his end. And the priests are worried about this because they basically need Toranaga so they can continue with their business. Hiramatsu, either the general or the captain, I think we'll just say he's a general until someone corrects me. Hiramatsu returns from Osaka to suggest to Toranaga that he enact a plan called Crimson Sky. So that is a full-scale assault on Osaka Palace, which would in turn cause the overthrow of the Regent's Council, and then in place will be the one ruler, which basically is the title of the show. It's Shogun. So this is again Toranaga refuses this because it would essentially place on him a title that he tried to discard a long time ago, where he insists on not becoming the Shogun. Likely it would go against the wishes that the late Taiko had charged upon him. During the evening, the Anjin finally has this time with Lady Kiku, and she basically treats him with the utmost amount of kindness, respect, and like intimacy. So basically trying to appease the Anjin so he can forget about his troubles. So although the night happens where he ends up going to the same room as Kiku, nothing really happens. And so as it turns out, his mind really is on someone else, which presumably is Mariko. And then so Kiku sees this and decides like nothing is going to happen. So as much as she tried to like comfort John, the Anjin, she ends up taking him back home to Mariko. Back in Osaka, Lord Ishido keeps on trying to appease Ochiba, insisting that there will be actions made against Toranaga so he can finally be executed. But he can't do it without a vote between the regents. So at this time, Sugiyama, one of the regents, basically accuses Ishido of basically imprisoning them. Sugiyama steps up and accuses Ishido of trying to suppress the regents into doing his bidding by holding their families hostage and forcing them to take action against Toranaga. Sugiyama refuses to participate because he sees the corruption that has now seeped into Ishido, and also helped in part by Ochiba's influence. As a result, Sugiyama is killed along with his people. And then, of course, the story was made up that he was killed by bandits. So the action against Sugiyama makes it so that basically forces Toranaga's hand and tells him that Crimson Sky is going to be coming. So then this is the part where maybe we're going to see like a full scale assault on Osaka, so that a Shogun can be placed. All right. So that concludes this episode. So we're going to go ahead and move into episode 7, which is A Stick of Time. Stick of Time basically refers to the price that gets paid for to the madam, the brothel. Price will be revealed later. So basically, the episode opens with Toranaga and a long lost relative. So this relative is actually none other than Saiki. He is a brother of Toranaga, and they essentially had a bit of a falling out, which caused them to be separated from each other. Toranaga decides he needs to recruit Saiki to help him enact the Crimson Sky plan. And so in order to acquire Seiki's help, Toranaga tries to convince him by buying him a week of time with Lady Kiku, basically the best courtesan in that brothel. So amazingly, she is always getting called up to service men pretty much all the time. So throughout the show. In exchange, the madam requests that he requests a stick of time from Toranaga. During the stick of time between Toranaga and the madam, now I'm just remembering her name is I think her name is Gin. So essentially, she asks for a favor. She basically decides she wants to have Toranaga's children, and that and she's getting older in her age and getting to a point where she can no longer rely on her looks. And but he naturally refuses the offer. Later on in the episode, he writes up a will, basically leaving a bunch of making a lot of requests so that his lands that be turned over to his grandchildren, and he also wanted to offer Gin some land so she can do what she wants to do with it. Yeah, but during the episode, like Buntaro ends up uh, approaching like Toranaga with a request to sever the head of the Anjin because he just doesn't like how he looks, how Mariko looks at him, or how and the Anjin looks at Mariko. And so like Toranaga basically says, "Hey, if she's cheating on you, then you need to take her head off." But Buntaro basically says, "No, I can't do that. I want to kill him." "No, you cannot do." And then Toranaga says, "No, you can't do that. You have to, if you kill him, you have to kill her too." And then Buntaro basically is essentially defeated, and then he basically stumbles away. However, this doesn't end. This ends up like causing some anger within like Toranaga towards Mariko, who he now suspects Mariko is now serving another master. So that is the Anjin. So now it seems as though Mariko is serving three masters: the Lord God, the Lord God, Toranaga, and now the Anjin. So how many masters is she serving at this point? And he starts to question her loyalties. So basically he tells her, your loyalties are to me. Mariko basically retaliates, saying, "Hey, if you don't think I'm loyal enough to you, I offer you can kill me." Which essentially highlights like a recurring theme within Mariko, where Mariko is now where Mariko like basically allows her misery to continue to like live in her to a point where she's got a death wish. She has a very persistent death wish, and she wants nothing more than to be free of it, be free of her life. The night that Toranaga is now celebrating with Saiki, with the prospect of them allying with each other to enact the Crimson Sky plan, Saiki ends up revealing through subtle ways, before like outwardly, rightly like overtly showing his power, that Saiki was approached by Lord Ishido to take the next spot over, take the next seat, and essentially vote Toranaga out of the council. Basically voting for, not out of the council, but basically voting for his impeachment as a regent lord. There's a lot of disagreements, and Saiki presents Toranaga with an ultimatum to just surrender, or basically see his everyone he under his protection die. So things don't really go well. And then like Toranaga's son is quite helpless. He tries to like take matters in his own hands, and then now he goes after Saiki with the intention to kill him. Unfortunately, like and he tries to kill him after Saiki sleeps with Lady Kiku. However, like the attempt doesn't succeed. Some of Saiki's guards die, but unfortunately for Toranaga's son, he slips onto a rock and he basically cracks his head open, the back of his head open, which slowly bleeds his life away. And so the episode ends with Toranaga's son perishing from the head trauma. And then Saiki basically says, "Well, that's where's the beauty in this death, in this fight?" Yep, and that basically concludes A Stick of Time. So let's move on to The Abyss of Life, which is episode 8. The Abyss of Life is a rather like a very, very like depressing one to go through, because as the show goes on, more and more key players are just getting crossed off and taken off the board. So in The Abyss of Life, now Toranaga now has to mourn his son for 49 days, basically like escorting his people down to Edo to mourn his son, and yeah, and so this also ends up delaying, them going to Osaka to turn themselves in, basically. Um, yeah. During the mourning period, like during the mourning period, there's a lot of doubts as to whether or not that Toranaga will ever fight for his people, because towards the end of the episode, Toranaga basically declares that Crimson Sky was basically a fool's plan. It was a mistake to basically say that this was a viable plan, and that the plan was just doomed to fail from the start. And as a result, like everyone is basically losing face. The Anjin is extremely angry at Toranaga and his people for choosing a defeatist attitude and basically surrendering to an enemy. And essentially, so now, like, everyone feels defeated. Yabushige does not know where he's at, but he is essentially like his judgment becomes much more clouded, especially that in the previous episode, which I totally missed out on, Yabushige had a general who was a spy in Osaka, and unfortunately Saiki had executed him because he found out that he was the spy. And so Yabushige had lost his ability to spy and being able to play multiple sides. So at least that's how I remember it. Again, this is a lot of information that I have been trying to digest over time. So, I swear it was really worth watching. So anyway, so everyone is feeling very dispirited, including Hiramatsu, who had served Toranaga for a very, very long time. And so, Toranaga is by this time he has gotten sick, and he does not wish to cause any more useless bloodshed. And now Hiramatsu is starting to feel very, very disparaged by his defeatist attitude. So now they're at a point now where they're going to sign away their lives on a piece of paper, declaring their intention to surrender. Toranaga is going to be sending representatives to essentially sign the document of surrender. But then during the signing ceremony, Hiramatsu refuses to participate. He refuses to offer his signature. So instead, what he offers is a chance to commit seppuku. And he selects Buntaro as his second, the one who will basically sever his head when he commits seppuku. He basically tests Toranaga's resolve that he does not wish to serve in this capacity. So out of shame, he is Hiramatsu goes through with the act. Sticks his knife into his stomach and slices it open before Buntaro decapitates him. So this basically so the act witnessed in front of Toranaga's men, including Yabushige, confirms that Toranaga for real is going to be surrendering this fight. He does not want to fight anymore. So now everyone is compelled to just surrender. But then Yabushige is now looking for a way to preserve his own life. So early on in the episode, the Anjin offered his services, like his naval services to Yabushige after like Toranaga falls. Yabushige was very resolute, and he was really wanting to remain loyal to Toranaga, which is basically what he said. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he was just waiting for a time to play for the strongest side. But almost it seems genuine, but I wouldn't count on it yet. Not until the very end to see like where his intentions lie. But the very act of Hiromatsu committing seppuku in the ceremony ends up like convincing Yabushige to accept the Anjin's offer to basically join him and to join him as his as his like admiral, or basically joining his side. And so like later that same later on, Mariko approaches Toranaga, and basically they discuss Hiromatsu's sacrifice, which turns out to be part of the plot that Toranaga had formed. So Toranaga basically reasoned that admitting defeat was the only way to get for the plan to work. So he did. So Yabushige accepted accepted the Anjin services, and now it's getting to a point where Toranaga is actively now beginning to sacrifice many of his people in order to enact a plan, which is slowly but surely becoming to fruition. So, because at the very end of the episode, Toranaga basically asks Mariko if she's ready to do her part, which Mariko says, "Yes, I'm ready to do my part." So, and that is essentially the main plot thread, where Toranaga is officially surrendering, but doesn't really, and in fact, Toranaga has not yet accepted defeat. He is just simply going about a roundabout way of allowing for his plan to take fruition. At the end of it, at the very, very end of the episode, Toranaga presides over the place where his son's ashes are burned, and as well as presumably Hiromatsu. He basically thanks them for their deaths, and before he finally takes off. And continues to execute his plan. So that is that for The Abyss of Life. I do apologize for missing out any other plot points within episode 8. I know I might have missed a lot more, but it is a lot of stuff to digest, because I guess in future, I probably will go ahead and watch one episode at a time, but that would be too late to catch up to episode 10. So anyway, I just wanted to leave it there on episode 8. But feel free to talk about any other discussion points on episode 8. So and then many other of the episodes that we talked about. I am not perfect. I try my best to understand all how the threads weave in this rather interesting tapestry they call an epic mini series. But it is really fascinating to be a part of this as a viewer. So anyway, so that concludes it for The Abyss of Life, and then we'll move on to the last episode before we get to see episode 10, so which is Crimson Sky. So in Crimson Sky, in Crimson Sky, in Crimson Sky. Okay. In Crimson Sky, uh, Mariko, at a younger age, she ends up receiving her Christian name from from a young father, Martin Alvito, and essentially she is gifted a rosary and accepts becoming a Catholic. So this is essentially this is like flashback scene when she converted. And so finally, um, the Anjin and Mariko make it to Osaka to formally surrender to Ishiro. Um, uh, but then Mariko refuses to stay, and in spite of all this, Mariko insists that she is not the one um, to surrender herself. Basically she's arguing that her surrender is not needed, but rather the surrender of the men who served under him, and then Toranaga himself. So she makes her case, but she does not. But her request is not granted, and instead she announces her intention to commit seppuku if she is not released. Ochiba tries to shut down the conversation as well, insisting that they take up the matter privately, and unfortunately that doesn't fly very well. And so the next day, the very next morning, she tries to leave Osaka, only to be blockaded by Ishiro's guards. And but the now the significant point in this, in the departure, is that this is being done in the presence of the public eye, including the families of the regents still imprisoned. So basically, this is now starting to become a bit of a public spectacle as to like her willingness to escape. So in this process, like many of her bodyguards are killed, but not before taking out some of Ishiro's men as well. Until she ends up being one the last one standing. And I'm just gonna basically looking up yep, okay, so that's what it was. I believe that the weapon that she had, that she reached out for, was a naginata. So like a pole arm with a blade at the very end. So it's basically a spear. In the past, like I think we've seen Mariko utilize this weapon, and she basically uses it against the guards. She gets some good shots, but ultimately the guards basically parry every one of her shots, and unfortunately, like Mariko, her strength is essentially exhausted, and she essentially is left in tears, her spirit broken, unable to leave the Osaka palace. So then she tearfully goes back, and then commits to to taking her own life through seppuku. And she also has like a little interaction with her son, who basically says he's ashamed of her for continuing to put up this act, and she's in tears, but he's just trying to understand what the hell is going on, and basically tells her mother, stop doing this, stop embarrassing us, and not knowing like what the full gravity of the situation is. Then Ochiba invites the Anjin to talk with Mariko as the translator, but under the covers, Ochiba is actually wanting to talk to Mariko and talk her out of committing seppuku because of the through their shared childhood memories and the memories that they once shared, the ones that made them the proudest and the happiest. Unfortunately, this conversation does not work. Mariko fully intends on committing seppuku, because she's not allowed to serve her lord Toranaga. And later on in the council, like Ochiba basically tells Ishiro and the remaining council regents that she will go ahead and take her own life regardless of what happens, because she is not allowed to leave the city. Ishiro is basically stuck in a situation where if Mariko dies, then then Osaka's high family, then the highest of Osaka's families will rise up against him because they allowed her to be killed. But if she escapes, then like everyone who is currently imprisoned is going to be asking to be released as well. So the night that Mariko is set to like take her own life, she the second that she had asked for to execute her, like was a Christian regent. So unfortunately, he does not follow through on his promise to help her die. So the Anjin steps up to take her head once she puts the knife in her stomach, and while her son is watching. And so eventually, like in the last few moments, they actually close the shades, and she's tearful and she's ready to like stick the blade in her stomach. But then the shades open up, and then a piece of paper gets thrown down, and it turns out that that piece of paper is from Lord Ishiro, who basically caves in and actually allows Mariko to leave Osaka. I think this was actually quite effective, and basically like turns out that the lesser of the two problems was to allow Mariko to live and leave Osaka, and then in the same room, everyone else basically asked for their release from Osaka, and to which Ishiro says, we're not jailers. You guys are free to leave when you want. Just go ahead and apply for your permits, and then you can leave the castle. And he basically is disgusted at Mariko and her actions that basically forced his hand to allow them to leave. And so, and then that same evening, it's everyone's like in celebration that it's that in celebration that, hey, you know what, everyone's finally leaving. However, the Portuguese priests are not convinced that this is the case, and so like they're very suspicious of what Toranaga is up to. But sometime after that exchange, like he sees, sometime after that exchange, between the Portuguese priests, Father Alvido, he encounters the Anjin once again. Now realizing that the Anjin has graduated to some level of conversational Japanese, meaning that he now, at least understands what people say and how they communicate things, which is very surprising to him, and in some ways, very happy for him, but at the same time, not so happy, because they're still, at the end of the day, enemies, from their own respective corners. So I thought it was kind of like interesting seeing that dynamic. So like the priest originally said in episode 2 that, we are enemies, but I'm not your assassin. So he saying that he won't be the one to kill him, but we are still enemies. So yeah. Okay. So in the meantime, Yabushige, the double dealer that he is, he ends up like receiving an offer from Ishiro. But what is the offer? Not sure exactly what the offer is, but basically in exchange for his life, he wants him to do a favor. So like, So the same evening, Yabushige is executing certain guards, and he allows a group of shinobi to swarm in. Yeah. So and then prior to these events, um, the Anjin and Mariko actually affirm their love for each other, and then they make love, and then and so yeah, they truly do care about each other. And also, and as a plus, he still has his guns, so that's going to be figure even more so into the episode where during the shinobi invasion, they quickly deduce that the shinobi that Ishiro is actually after after Mariko. So they try to escape, and you see some really good fights here. So, and also you get to see you actually get to see the Anjin show how good he is with his guns, his muskets. So flintlock pistols. I think they are called flintlock pistols. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how difficult it can be to reload in those days, and you can only load one shot at a time. They didn't have high capacity magazines back then, so reloading was a pain in the butt while they tried to find their route towards escape. So eventually, the group, so Yabushige eventually joins their escaping group. While many of their people are getting slaughtered by the shinobi, but eventually the Anjin, Mariko, and Yabushige, along with more of their people, have escaped into a storehouse. They lock the storehouse, but then they overhear the shinobi preparing explosives. They're getting the fuses ready, and they're ready to light it up, so that they can blow open the storehouse to capture Mariko. So Mariko now accepts her fate, and she basically stands in front of the door, and as the door gets blown into smithereens by the by the explosives outside, this basically kills off Mariko, and which will undoubtedly trigger Crimson Sky, because that will because her death basically, as noted before, her death will not only anger but will motivate the high Osaka families to go against Ishiro for confining her and having her killed. So that's basically the lead up into episode 10, which will release very soon. And as a new fan of Shogun, I am very, very excited to see the conclusion of this season and where this goes from here. I can imagine the amount of emotional fallout that's going to come from Mariko's death, because nobody is going to survive that blast, and especially not at that proximity. So props to Anna Sawai for portraying Mariko so well. I love her very much, and I look forward to seeing what other new projects she gets into after this. But in the meantime, cheers to Hiroki Sanada, and to everyone who made this show possible, and great job to the actors and actresses who put out 150% of themselves into this project. This is a wonderfully, beautifully made project, and I'm so looking forward to reacting to episode 10. Am I going to get disappointed, or am I going to be awesome, feel awesome? That who knows? I'm looking forward to it. So cheers to FX and Hulu for this awesome show. I would have gladly paid 3 months to just uh, watch and digest each episode at a time and just linger on it. And yeah, in the meantime, like, can't wait for episode 10. So thank you very much, everyone. So if you made it this far, thank you again for your support. Really do appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please do like the video, comment on what you enjoyed and what you didn't enjoy. If you want to see more content like this, please do subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. All right, that's it for me, everyone. And I promise you it'll be a much shorter episode when episode 10 comes around. All right, thanks, everyone. Hang loose.